solutions. How to do the computations that we need to be able to give an IV. These are on your book. The class examples are in your workbook, page 32. Okay. At the top, right under IV solutions, it says, for problems 1 through 5, give how many milliliters per hour and how many drops per minute. They will always ask for two different answers on IV problems. They'll ask for the milliliters per hour and then the drops per minute. In the IV problems, we need to be given something called SDF. SDF is the standard drop factor. This is actually a measure of how thick or gooey the medicine is. It's given in drops per milliliter. GTS or GTT is drops.
That's what I thought she told us.
So the word GTT, they will label it GTT per milliliter. That's drops per milliliter. This has to be given on the medicine. It's not something you can figure out on your own. How many drops per milliliter are, if you picture something like honey. Honey is real thick, and as honey drops, it gets a great big drop before it falls. So it drops slower, but each drop is bigger, so there are less drops. Then if you have a medicine that's closer to water, water drops very fast, but each drop is smaller. So it has to do with how thick the medicine is, but again, you don't know this, you can't compute it, it has to be labeled. And it's labeled on all of the IVs, drops per milliliter. What we do is we always first take the number of milliliters divided by hour. And that gives us the first answer, milliliters per hour. And remember, when you label your answers, milliliter, you have to write out the word per. You cannot go milliliters slash hour. The slash is no longer allowed as an abbreviation for per. So the first answer, you'll get to state the number of milliliters divided by how many hours they tell you to give it, and your answer is labeled milliliters per hour. Then you take that answer that they give you, multiply times the SDF, which is the standard drop factor, and you divide by 60. It's always times the drop factor divided by 60, because this answer is in hours. When we divide by 60, it's now in minutes, and this answer is now drops per minute. Now, the reason we have two answers is most machines nowadays, you set how many milliliters per hour. But you still sometimes have to use the old, where you just put it on the line and it adjusted how many drops. So sometimes you still have to know drops per minute. So we always give two answers, milliliters per hour and drops per minute. So this first problem on page 32 says, give 400 milliliters in 4 hours. 500 milliliters in 4 hours. So we always just start off taking the milliliters divided by the hours. And this answer is milliliters per hour. Then the second part of the problem is to take that answer that you got right there, and you multiply it times the standard drop factor. Sometimes they will label it SDF. If not, you have to know the standard drop factor is always what's labeled drops per milliliter. So you multiply it times the drop factor, and we divide by 60. Now this number we round off to the nearest whole number. We don't use any decimals here, we round it to a whole number because this answer is drops per minute. And you can't give me 8/10 of a drop. So the drops are always rounded off to whole number. So we have two answers. One answer will always be how many milliliters per hour. The other answer will be how many drops per minute. Okay? Problem number 2. Give 1,500 milliliters in 8 hours. So the first part takes the milliliters divided by the hours. And remember, on milliliters, you can keep a tenth, so leave it 187.5 milliliters per hour. Then the second step takes that answer and multiplies it times the drop factor. And what is the drop factor?
20.
And we always divide by 60 because that changes it from hours to minutes. Times 20 divided by 60. But these we don't leave 62.5. These we round up to a whole number. Okay. Number 3. Number 3 says to give 3 liters in 24 hours. We cannot work with anything except milliliters. In the IV problems, it has to be milliliters. So 3 liters is how many milliliters? You move your decimal. 3,000. 3,000 milliliters divided by 24 hours. Milliliter per hour. Then we take that answer times the drop factor and divide by 60. $31.25, so we leave it 31 drops per minute. Number 4, 1,000 milliliters in 12 hours. Milliliters, we do keep a tenth. then that answer times the drop factor divided by 60. It's always 60 because that's changing hours to minutes. Here's the 60s cancel. But on the drops, it needs to be a whole number. Milliliters can be a tenth. Drops have to be a whole number. $1,500 milliliters in 8 hours. You not only have to have the answer, it has to be labeled right on these. And then times the drop factor divided by 60. Okay? Okay, on the next page, number 6. Number 6 says 5% dextrose in water. This is labeled D5W, but that's just telling you what you're giving. This is just sugar water. 500 milliliters to be infused over the next 6 hours. So I have 500 milliliters over 6 hours. $83.3 milliliter per hour. We have to skip to the bottom of it till it says there are 15 drops per milliliter. So 83.3 times the drop factor over 60. Round to the whole number for the drops. Now that's the first part of this problem that says 500 milliliters over the next 6 hours. But this problem says sometimes you have to go reset the flow. You don't set a patient and go off for 6 hours and then come back and check them 6 hours later. What they did here is that after 2 hours, you've gone in and checked, and there's only 300 milliliters left. So now I need to see if I'm going to have to readjust it. After 2 hours, there were only 300 milliliters left. I started off going to give it for 6 hours, but if 2 hours are gone by, how many hours are left? For now, I take the 300 divided by 4, and now I see it needs to be changed to 75 milliliters per hour. Sometimes because of rounding or sometimes just because of the weather conditions. Some IVs will go a lot faster some days than the other days. So if I've reset it for 75, now I go 75 times the drop factor over 60. Or 19 drops per minute. So sometimes you have to go in and check and see if you need to adjust the IV. Now, number 7 says 60 milligrams have been ordered, but there are 60 milligrams in 50 milliliters. The drop factor is 10, infuse in 30 minutes. This problem says infuse in 30 minutes, so we can't have a milliliters per hour. So we're only going to go to the last step that says how many milliliters times the drop factor, which is 10. But this time we're dividing by 30 minutes because we're not going to give it a whole hour. If you're not giving it for at least an hour, you can't give milliliters per hour. We divide by the number of minutes. And 16.6 or 17 drops per minute. So this is the exception to the rule. We don't find milliliters per hour if it's not going to run for at least an hour. Okay, number 8. We ready for 8? Number 8 says 100 micrograms per kilogram per minute. Now, we've seen these before that are the per problems. This says we don't give the same amount of drug to everybody. The per problems, the first step told us to take the number of pounds of the patient and divide by 2.2. So when I see the per, it doesn't matter whether it's IV or tablets. You always take pounds divided by 2.2. And then you take the 70 times how much drug I'm supposed to give. Now, this is not quite like the others, because the others said per day, and we had to divide by the times per day. But this one says per minute. 7,000 micrograms per minute. Now, what I have to do is figure out how to find how many milliliters. If it's an IV problem, I have to know how many milliliters. And if I'm ordered to give in 7,000 micrograms, I look on the bottle, and it tells me 4 grams of drug have been added to 1 liter. So there's 4 grams of drug in 1 liter. How many milliliters is that? And I've been ordered to give 7,000 micrograms, but I need to change micrograms to grams. So I move it 3 decimal places and then 3 more. If the bottle is labeled in grams, I have to change my order to grams. So 4x, when I multiply 1,000 times 0.007, this is now milliliters, because I took the bottle and changed in per contains to find out how many milliliters to give. But this was micrograms per minute, so this is milliliters per minute. So now all we have to do is take the 1.75 times the drop factor. We don't divide by 60 because it already is minutes. Normally we take the milliliters times drop factor divided by 60. But since this is already minutes, we don't have to divide. 35 drops per minute. This really had several things to it. It has the per problem that we've done, and then we have to take the amount of drug and use the label to find how many milliliters. So it's just like the oral and parenteral. You take the bottle, see what the label on the bottle is, N per contains, to find out the milliliters.
How did you get the 1,000 milliliters? Grams?
Because I took the 7,000 micrograms. 3 to milli, 3 more to grams.
Micrograms, thank you. Okay,
Okay. Was there a question?
thank you.
On milligrams, don't you round that to the 10th position? You have one.
We don't round until our final answer. If we're doing arithmetic here, this is not one of the answers we give, milliliters per minute. If it were milliliters per hour as an answer, we would give it. But if it's not an answer, we don't round until we're through. Because if you round, you are going to get quite a bit different answer. Unless it's an answer, we don't do any rounding till the end. Okay, anything else? Okay, now number 9 is a different type of problem where it asks you how long. The rest of the problems told you how long to run it, so you had to decide what to set it at. Well, this time it tells you to set it at 60 drops per minute, but it wants to know how long it's going to take. This time we take the milliliters times the drop factor divided by the drops per minute. Our normal one was milliliters times drop factor divided by 60 minutes. Now it's milliliters times drop factor divided drops per minute. Just think we normally put minutes on bottom, so now we're going to put the thing that has minutes on the bottom. The top is just like we've done it, milliliters times drop factor, but we put something with minutes on the bottom. So it says 800 milliliters at 60 drops per minute. The per minute goes on the bottom. And what's the drop factor? Oh, sorry. Thank you. That's 800. The milliliters times the drop factor. And what is the drop factor?
30.
30. So when I take 800 times 30 divided by 60, this answer is in minutes. We don't want to leave it 400 minutes because you don't want to sit there and watch your watch go for 400 minutes. We're going to change this to hours, but we're not going to our calculator. We're not going to our calculator because if we take our calculator, 400 divided by 60, I get 6.6666 hours. What we're going to do is we're going to divide 60 into 400 without a calculator. 60 will go into 400, 6 times 60 is 360. And we're going to leave that as minutes. So it's 6 hours and 40 minutes. If you do it on your calculator, people aren't going to know how much 6.666 hours are. So we have to tell it to them in hours and minutes. So we don't go to our calculator because we'd get a decimal. We divide 60 and see what's left over, and what's left over is the minutes. Okay, number 10. It's still milliliters times the drop factor. Instead of dividing by minutes, though, we divide by drops per minute. But this answer is minutes. This time, if I do divide it into there, it goes exactly 5 hours. So this, and if you went to your calculator, you lucked out. It was a whole number. We didn't have any minutes left over. But don't give me an answer that's 6.6 hours. You have to figure out how many minutes that is. So tonight you want to do 34 through 36, but also look at the review. There's a review, page 37 through 38. Test 3 is Monday. It will be over tablets, oral and parenteral. Hold on just a minute, tablets, oral, parenteral, and the IVs that we've done tonight. Make sure you do some work on here. If you haven't done all of these problems, do all of these problems. Now, we just have this test, 2 more class periods in test 4. Another woohoo. We get through before spring break. Test 4 will be half from test 3 material. And I did this because this is the most important part of the course, is what you're actually giving dosages. So not only is this going to be test 3, half of test 4 will come from this material too. Okay, thank you. We have a test on Monday.